You guys sort of get to see a triage of how that would have happened for a wounded soldier.
As the war progressed in Europe, these sort of evacuation things really improved. And if you stop by display at all, I talked a lot about how the Second World War really pioneered medical evacuation for Americans. The reason why in the 60s and 70s we have EMS come into fruition is because of these techniques that were used in World War II. You can think of an ambulance EMT and an ambulance and an ER as the medics, the litter bearers, and the battalion aid station. Get this on. Believe it or not, by 1945, 97% of all the wounded survived. It was something that the Army was very proud of. Something that they talk a lot about in the show Mad. 97% of the casualties come through here survived. That was not a record that was achieved during Korea. It was a record that had been maintained since 1945. And a lot of the techniques with medicine only progressed with Korea and Vietnam. But before this, if you were wounded in the field, you could expect to be left there until someone comes to find you. In this era, the medic is there to get to you as fast as possible. The litter bearers wouldn't always come out in the middle of a battle like that. A lot of times, the medics would put a tag on them, treat them, get them stabilized, and leave them behind. If they could walk, to the point you say you got a quarter of a mile that way, battalion aid station is there, bring yourself back there. But if you can't, you don't always have access to a vehicle, you have to work all manpower. Now if you hear how out of breath I am, simply from going from there to here. In Italy, sometimes these litter carries could last up to 6 hours. Imagine 4 guys carrying 180-pound dead weight dude who's having the worst day of his life, up and down the hills and the mountains. It's exhausting. It's one of the reasons why in the Italian campaign there are so many psychological casualties. There's a reason why they have to set up rest and rehabilitation centers, which is something like the military's very first mental health treatment centers. This was not only tough in a physical way, but it was extremely tough on the mind. And this has happened all the time during World War II. It's a really, really brutal job. A lot of times litter bearers will show up shortly after an accident would occur. No real blood. We promise no real blood here. Just a prop. So, litter bearers would come in really shortly after a battle would happen, and you would literally put the litter down and search the field. You had to find people that potentially passed out, people who went from being stable to not stable anymore. And that's a challenge in itself. You're coming up to the front line right after there's an active battle. There could be ordnance in the field still. There could be enemy that you can't see. You could get hit with artillery. Just because you're a rear line medic doesn't mean that you're not in danger or you're less of an infantryman. You just have a very different task. And this sort of stuff was actually looked at by our enemies during World War II as being a weakness. So why were we spending so much time on being humanitarian when you could give those medics guns and they could fight? But I always have to tell people that we won the war. Those countries that thought humanitarianism was weak lost the war. So whenever you call 911 on that horrible day and you need an ambulance, just know that those professionals have their roots and origins in men and women in the Army and Navy medical departments, most of whom had never practiced medicine of any kind before in their lives. And they helped develop techniques that we still use today. These litters here were used by civilian fire services and EMS services well through the 1970s and 80s. And I guarantee you there's places down here in firehouses that still have these World War II litters because the techniques came home with the guys. And while it may have taken 20 or 30 years for them to really take fruition in our civilian world, that is truly the reason why we have contemporary emergency medical systems. This guy has a 97% chance of surviving now. From here, this casualty collection point, he'll go about a quarter of a mile behind the lines with the battalion aid station. Think of that as an EO. It's very similar to an EO. You got one doctor, tons of trained physicians who are there to stabilize, to take advantage of it, to reassess it. We're going to look at the tag he has on him to see what the medic did in the field. And now we're going to move on. And still, the name of the game is keep them going. Evacuate, evacuate, evacuate. Because the faster you can evacuate people, the more effectively you can treat them. It's not like the past where you stuck in the field for 6 hours in the mud, praying someone will find you. During World War II, you hollered for medics. medic came. And it was part of the job to expose yourself to fire and to deliberately make the enemy see you. So just because medics didn't carry weapons didn't mean they weren't infantrymen who were truly morally and mentally tough. This sort of stuff happened all the time. And even during the Korean War, there were militaries that lasted up to 12 hours. Can you imagine what that must be like for the people that have to do it? You're already wanting to help this guy, you feel bad for him, and now you yourself are physically exhausted and in pain, just trying to help him. It's one of the lousiest jobs in the Army, but it's also one of the most important, and is truly just a symbol of how modern we were just in the 1940s. We're still using these techniques now. From here, we'll go to the aid station. From the aid station, we'll go to a collecting station. And if he's bad enough, we'll go to a clearing station as the very last stop on the division medical line. Anywhere from there, he's out of our division sector. He's going into way beyond the rare, to hospitals and other stuff like that. Clearing stations usually have a hospital attached, an independent field hospital. In this case, it would be like the 33rd Field Hospital we served in Europe. And those are a lot like we imagine what mass hospitals are like, in a sense. That look with all the tents. The battalion aid station wasn't like that though. The whole battalion aid station could look exactly like this. It could just be a tree. Good enough. So long as it's close enough to the front that it facilitates rapid evacuation. And of course, if you're bad enough, you will go and you will be evacuated from the division medical system to the zone of the interior and possibly back home again. It's really interesting. And the United States military had these medical outposts all over the world. You had army hospitals in Iran, Iraq, West Africa. It wasn't just combat zones. So these techniques weren't just pioneered on the battlefield, but literally all around the world at the same time in the 40s.